I had waited 5 long years to see those lines. 5 years of tracking my cycle in colorful apps on my phone, of swallowing vitamins that tasted like chalk, of watching pregnancy announcements pop up on my social media while I sat on the couch and smiled with my mouth instead of my heart. 5 years of doctor visits in Detroit, Michigan, where the walls were painted in calming colors that did nothing to calm me. 5 years of hearing words like unexplained and maybe next time from people in white coats who got to go home and live their normal lives. My name is Alana Pierce, Black American, and this is the story of how my life fell apart and then opened up. Our house in Detroit wasn't special to anyone but us. It was a small 2-story place with peeling white paint and a front porch that leaned a little to the left when the wind hit it hard. The floors creaked, the roof worried me every winter, and the pipes clanged when you turned on the hot water. But it was ours. We had bought it with help from a first-time homeowner program, scraping together every spare dollar we could. I used to stand in the spare bedroom, the one with the small square window that faced a tired maple tree, and picture it as a nursery. In my mind, it always had soft yellow walls, a white crib, and tiny books stacked on a shelf. In real life, it had boxes of old clothes and a folded treadmill I never used. I worked at an insurance office downtown, processing claims and answering calls from people on their worst days. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave us health insurance. I was good with numbers and forms and staying calm when people yelled. Marcus, my husband, said I had quiet strength. Marcus was a sales manager for a logistics company that moved goods around the country. He loved to talk about big deals. That was his phrase for everything. A promotion was a big deal. A dinner with his boss was a big deal. A new client in another state, the biggest deal. He would stand in our narrow kitchen with his tie loosened and tell me that one day, one of those big deals would pay off, and we'd move out of Detroit to somewhere warmer. He talked about getting a house in Georgia or maybe Florida, and sometimes he'd add, and then we'll take a trip to Europe, just you and me, no kids, first class all the way. But we never got to the kids part. Every month was a cycle of hope and disappointment. The first couple of years, we joked about it, said we were just enjoying our time together. By year 3, the jokes stopped. By year 4, the silence between us grew heavier. I saw the way his mother, Diane, watched me at family dinners in Baltimore, Maryland, her eyes drifting to my stomach whenever I stood up. She never said anything cruel, not out loud, but she did say, when your cousin Tiana got married, she had a baby within the year. Some women are just very fertile. I laughed it off, but the words set inside me like stones. The morning everything changed started like any other ordinary day. The sky outside was gray, the kind of dull color that makes it hard to tell what time it is. Marcus had already left for the airport, headed to Columbus, Ohio, for yet another important meeting. He kissed my forehead on his way out, told me he'd call when he landed, and reminded me that this trip could really move things forward for him. I nodded, told him to be safe, and watched him walk down the front steps with his carry-on bag. I didn't know that it would be the last time I saw him as the man I thought I knew. After he left, I went to the bathroom and sat there for a long time, staring at the cheap drugstore test on the edge of the sink. It wasn't my first test. I had watched so many of them stay blank or show that single lonely line that I almost didn't want to try again. But my period was late, really late, and my body felt different. My breasts were sore, and I was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. My heart was pounding so hard it made my hands shake. Still, I finally picked up the test, followed the same directions I knew by heart, and set it down again like a fragile piece of glass. Those few minutes felt like an hour. I stared at the floor, at the crack in the tile by the tub, at the little rust stain around the drain. I tried to calm my breathing, told myself not to hope too much, not to break again. When I finally looked, 2 bright pink lines were staring back at me, bold and clear, like they had been waiting there the whole time. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then the world narrowed down to that tiny plastic stick. I pressed my fist against my mouth to muffle the sound because a scream was already clawing at my throat. I wasn't sure if it was a laugh or a cry. Maybe both. Tears rushed into my eyes, hot and sudden, blurring everything. I sat down hard on the closed toilet lid and just let myself feel it, the shock, the relief, the fear, the joy. I whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular, to the universe, to my body, to whatever had finally let this happen. We had about $4,300 in our savings account then. Not much, but to me it suddenly looked like a beginning. I had already started a secret list in my phone months ago, back when I needed something to hold on to, crib, tiny socks, car seat, paint for the nursery, a rocking chair. I opened it again now and added first ultrasound picture frame. I thought about the old spare room upstairs, how I would clear out the boxes, how Marcus would grumble about moving the treadmill, and how we would stand together in the doorway and talk about where to put the crib. I could already see that small white crib by the window, sunlight spilling over the mattress. Marcus didn't know yet. I decided he shouldn't hear it over the phone. This news was too big for a call or a text. He deserved more than. Guess what? Sent us a message while he waited for his luggage. I wanted to see his face when I told him. I wanted to watch the shock and joy spread across it. Wanted to feel his arms around me. I wanted a moment we would talk about for the rest of our lives. So I made a plan. I called my boss and said I wasn't feeling well, that I needed a sick day. My voice trembled a little, but she just told me to rest and drink fluids. Then I went to the closet and pulled out the little white onesie I had bought almost a year before, on a day when I had felt weirdly certain things would work out. It had "Hello Daddy" printed across the front in black letters. I had hidden it back then, ashamed of my hope, but now I laid it out on the bed with careful hands. I put the pregnancy test in a clear plastic sandwich bag, wiped it clean, and laid it on top of the onesie. I packed an overnight bag with a couple of dresses, a toothbrush, my skincare stuff, and a pair of flats. I checked the weather in Columbus and tossed in a light jacket. Then I grabbed my purse, my phone, and the little bundle of proof that my life had finally turned a corner. As I locked the front door, I glanced back at the house. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see a place full of quiet disappointments. I saw a future. The drive to Columbus felt like the start of a new life. The highway stretched out in front of me, long and open. The sky brightened as the sun rose higher, and a soft, pale light spilled over the road. The radio played old R&B songs, and even the sad ones sounded hopeful. I found myself humming along, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on my flat stomach. There was nothing to feel yet, not really, but in my mind, I was already talking to the tiny life inside me, telling it that I was here, that I had waited, that I was ready. I imagined how it would go when I walked into Marcus's hotel lobby. He would be sitting there, maybe on his phone, and he'd look up, surprised to see me. I'd hand him a small gift bag with tissue paper, acting nervous on purpose just to tease him. He'd open it, pull out the onesie, laugh, and then see the test. For a second, everything would be silent. Then he'd look at me with wide eyes and ask, "Are you serious?" I'd nod. He'd lift me off the ground, right there in front of strangers, and I wouldn't even care. I thought about calling his mother afterward, about hearing her scream with excitement through the phone, about the way she'd tell everyone at church that her son and his wife were finally expecting. I pictured baby showers and tiny shoes in our hallway and family Christmases where there was finally a child in the room. Every mile I drove, the dream grew bigger and brighter, like headlights coming toward me on a dark road. I never saw the pickup truck that ran the red light. I remember a flash of silver at the edge of my vision, the loud, tearing sound of metal twisting into metal, the sharp jolt as my body flew forward against the seatbelt. My head hit something hard. For a split second, the world tilted, spun, and everything inside the car felt loose and wrong. There was the smell of burned rubber and something hot, like smoke or blood. My ears rang. Then the world went black, like someone had reached into my skull and flipped a switch. I didn't know it yet, but there was another kind of darkness waiting for me, the kind that doesn't come from closed eyes or broken bones, but from the people you trust most choosing to hurt you. At that moment, all I knew was the feeling of falling into nothing, with the sound of my own heartbeat fading, and the hope I had waited 5 years for slipping out of reach. When I woke up, the world was made of sounds and shadows. A slow beep, steady like a metronome, the soft hiss of air from somewhere above me, footsteps in the hallway, rolling wheels, a distant voice calling for a doctor. My eyes felt heavy, like someone had stacked bricks on my eyelids. I tried to open them and was hit by a wave of pain that shot from my face down into my neck. My lips were swollen, my left eye barely opened at all. Something hard scratched the back of my throat, and when I tried to swallow, I gagged on a tube I couldn't see. A woman's face came into view, blurred at first and then a little clearer. She wore blue scrubs and a tired smile. Her badge had a small sunflower on it and the name Jenna. Her voice was soft, the kind people use for scared animals and children. "Hey, Alana," she said. "You're at Stevie Luke's hospital in Columbus. You were in a bad car accident. Blink if you can hear me." I blinked once. Tears slid into my hairline and mixed with the sweat on my forehead. My body felt strange, like it wasn't mine. My arms were heavy. My legs were distant. I could feel bandages on my face and chest. My tongue was dry and thick. I tried to speak, but only a rough sound came out. Jenna put a cool hand on my arm. "Don't push it yet," she said. "You've been through a lot." Later, a man in a white coat came in. He smelled faintly like coffee and soap. He introduced himself as Dr. Warren, though the name floated past me at first. He looked at the monitors, checked my eyes with a small light, listened to my chest. Then he told me I had been in a coma for days. My nose was broken. My cheekbone was shattered. My jaw had been fractured and wired. He said they had already done one surgery and would need to do more. He used words like reconstructive, swelling, scarring, long recovery. I listened, but my mind was locked on one thing. It felt like a stone in my throat, sharp and heavy. I tried again to speak. The tube was gone now, replaced by an ache in my chest and a dry burn in my throat. "The baby?" I croaked. The word came out torn and ugly, but he understood. He looked down for just a second. That was all it took. I saw the answer before he spoke. "I'm so sorry, Alana," he said quietly. "You lost the pregnancy. Your body went into shock. There was nothing we could do. There is a sound your soul makes when it breaks. No one else can hear it, but you feel it in your bones, in the hollow between your ribs. It's not a scream, not a cry, just an empty cracking." I turned my face away as much as the wires let me, and I let the grief hit me. It wasn't gentle. It came like a wave slamming into a shore, knocking down every bit of hope I had built. My hands shook. I tried to cover my face, but the 4 lines tugged, and all I could do was sob into the stiff hospital pillow. Time blurred after that. Day and night melted together into a gray soup. Nurses came and went, checking my vitals, changing my bandages, giving me pain medicine that made the edges of the world go soft. Sometimes I heard the television in the room next door. Sometimes I heard someone crying down the hall. My own pain, both in my body and in my chest, never really left. It only rose and fell like tides. Marcus came that first night after I woke up. His eyes were red, and his clothes were wrinkled, like he had slept in a chair or not at all. He took my hand carefully, like he was afraid I might break more. He kissed my fingers and whispered, "Oh baby, I thought I lost you." He cried, big loud tears that drew the attention of the nurse, who gave him a sympathetic look. On the surface, it was what a devoted husband would do. But even through the fog of painkillers, something felt off. His hand was warm, but his grip was too tight, almost desperate. His eyes slid away from mine too fast. When the nurse left the room, his shoulders relaxed a little too quickly, like he had been acting for an audience. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that grief was making me suspicious. I was exhausted, hurting, empty. I didn't have the strength to question anything. I drifted in and out of sleep while he sat beside me. Sometimes I woke to find him scrolling on his phone. Sometimes he was just staring at the wall. I caught small pieces of conversations he had in the hallway. "Yes, she's awake now. The doctors say a long recovery. No, she doesn't remember much yet." He always lowered his voice when he said that last part. I told myself it was just privacy. Sometime deep in the night, I woke again. The room was dark except for the weak glow from the machines. My eyes stayed closed, but my mind was awake. I lay there, listening. I heard the soft click of the door, the whisper of shoes on linoleum. Someone moved closer to my bed. It took me a second to place the voice. "Her bank app needs her fingerprint," Marcus whispered. "If I can just lift her hand while she's sedated, I can move the money before she wakes up." Another voice answered, lower and sharper, with that fast city clip I knew from family stories. It was his cousin Tasha, the one from Chicago, Illinois, who always had one more bill and one more emergency. I hadn't even known she was in town. "Do it," Tasha hissed. "You said she's got around $28,000 in savings and that insurance payout from that old house fire. That would clear my credit cards. She won't know what happened until it's all gone. You can just say the hospital messed something up." My heart started pounding so loud I was sure the monitors would give me away. I focused on my breathing, keeping it slow and even. I let my body stay limp, my eyelids still. Inside, though, I was screaming. The man holding my hand earlier, crying at my bedside, was now planning how to rob me while I lay broken in a hospital bed. I felt Marcus lift my right hand. His skin was warm against mine. My fingers hung like dead weight, but inside I wanted to curl them into a fist and punch him. He pressed my thumb hard onto something cold and flat. I knew the shape even without seeing it my phone. He muttered curse words under his breath when it didn't unlock right away. My thumb slipped. He tried again. Then I heard a small click and felt a short vibration. There, he breathed. Finally, he started speaking numbers in a low voice. Routing numbers, account balances, transfer amounts. 10,000 to Tasha, he said. Another $5,000. I'll move the rest later so it doesn't look suspicious. Tasha giggled under her breath, a quick, greedy sound that made my skin crawl. They thought I was asleep. After they left, I stayed frozen for a long time, afraid to open my eyes, afraid they might still be there. My chest hurt with more than just the injuries. I had already lost my baby. Now I had lost my husband in a different way. The man who had promised to protect me was standing over me like a thief in the night. When morning came, the light from the window was harsh and pale. My whole body ached. Jenna walked in with a gentle smile and a clipboard. She checked my bandages, the machines. How are you feeling today, Alana? She asked. I swallowed. My throat burned, but I forced the words out. Help, I whispered. Husband stole money last night. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say, Are you sure? Or you must be confused. She just leaned closer. Tell me what happened, she said. I told her in broken sentences, pausing to catch my breath. I told her about my hand, the phone, the transfers, the amount, the cousin in Chicago. I told her I had kept my eyes closed the whole time. Jenna squeezed my hand gently. Okay, she said. Thank you for telling me. I'm going to get someone who can help with this. You're safe here, all right? Within an hour, 2 detectives from Columbus Police came into my room. One was a tall man with kind eyes. The other was a woman with a tight bun and a small notebook. They spoke quietly, like they were afraid of breaking something fragile. They recorded my statement, let me rest when I got tired, and never once treated me like I was crazy. They called my bank while they were still in the room. I listened to them explain the situation, ask for every recent transfer to be frozen, every login checked. They had my accounts locked down and my phone flagged for fraud within minutes. They told me they would be waiting when Marcus came back. That evening, he walked into the room holding cheap flowers and wearing a carefully arranged sad face. When he saw the officers, he froze. Marcus Pierce? One of them asked. He looked confused, then nervous, then tried on a shaky smile. Yeah, that's me. Is something wrong? You're under arrest for attempted financial fraud and theft, the officer said. He stepped forward, read Marcus his rights while the other officer moved closer. Marcus turned to me with wide eyes, like I was the one hurting him. Alana, what did you do? He shouted as they cuffed him. We're family. I was just trying to help with the money. You know how the bills are. His voice echoed down the hall as they led him out. I watched him go, my face still and my heart heavy but steady. That was the last time I saw him as my husband. In my mind, something clicked shut. Whatever we had been, whatever we might have been, ended the moment he lifted my hand to steal from me. Lying there in that hospital bed in Columbus, bruised and stitched together, I thought I had reached the bottom. I thought the story was simple now. A broken woman, a greedy man, a ruined marriage. I told myself that once the legal part was over, I could rebuild slowly, piece by piece. I didn't know then that the accident itself was not as simple as it seemed. I didn't know about the other people involved, the lies behind the crash, the deeper betrayal waiting just beyond the door of that room. For the moment, all I knew was this: my baby was gone, my face was broken, my husband was in handcuffs, and the life I thought I was living had been ripped apart. I hadn't asked for any of it, but the pieces were lying there, waiting for me to decide what to do with them. A week after they took Marcus away in handcuffs, the swelling in my face finally started to go down. I could open both eyes now, though the left one still protested with a dull ache, and the bruises had moved from dark purple to a sickly yellow-brown. I was learning the geography of my own pain, which parts of my face pulled when I tried to smile, which ribs complained when I shifted in bed. The nurses had moved me out of intensive care into a quieter room with one window that looked out over the hospital parking lot. I spent a lot of time staring at those white lines on the asphalt, watching people come and go, pretending I was one of them, someone who would walk in, visit, and then leave without their whole life being rearranged. One afternoon, as the light was fading and the sky over Columbus was turning a soft, tired blue, a nurse walked in carrying an envelope and a small, cream-colored business card. "This just came for you, Miss Pierce," she said. "Delivered by courier. You can read it now or I can put it on the table for later." I told her I'd try now. My fingers were still stiff, but I managed to tear the envelope open slowly. Inside was a neatly folded letter, typed in crisp black ink. At the top, in formal script, it said, "Dear Miss Pierce." My stomach tightened. I shifted higher on the pillows and started to read. "My name is Edward Lang," it said. "My daughter Olivia was the driver of the vehicle that struck your car." I stopped there. Just seeing those words, "the driver of the vehicle that struck your car," made my throat close. I pictured the flash of silver, the sound of metal, the smell of burning. My hands began to shake, crinkling the paper. I forced myself to breathe slowly and kept reading. Edward wrote that Olivia was 23, from a wealthy family in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She had been in Columbus visiting friends, driving too fast, letting adrenaline and bad judgment mix with alcohol. He said she panicked after the crash, fled the scene, and had turned herself in later when the guilt swallowed her whole. He apologized over and over again, saying he knew his words were small and useless in the face of what I had lost. He wrote that no amount of money would bring back my child, but he wanted to cover every surgery, every hospital bill, every cost that had come from his daughter's mistake. It would have been enough, in another world, for the story to end there. A reckless young driver, a shattered stranger, a rich father trying to pay for the damage his daughter had caused. But at the bottom of the letter was one more paragraph, shorter than the others. It was the one that changed everything. "Police have informed us," he wrote, "that my daughter was not alone in the vehicle. The passenger fled the scene. From what we were told, the passenger worked at Pierce and Lowell Freight Solutions in Columbus, your husband's firm." My blood went cold. The page trembled in my hands. I read that paragraph again, then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. A passenger. Someone from Marcus's company. Someone who ran. I felt like the room had tilted, like my bed was sliding towards some unseen edge. When the detective came by later that day, I didn't wait for his usual small talk. "Who was the passenger?" I asked, my voice raw. "The one who ran." He paused in the doorway, then closed it gently behind him and came to sit in the chair by my bed. His name was Detective Harris. He had deep lines around his eyes, like someone who'd seen more than enough of the worst people could do. He let out a slow breath. "We were going to tell you when you were stronger," he said, "but since you asked." He reached into his folder and pulled out a glossy printout. He laid it on the table that swung across my lap. It was from a hotel security camera, the image slightly grainy, time stamped the night before my accident. In the picture, Marcus stood in a hotel hallway in a pressed shirt, his tie loose, his arm around a thin woman with long hair spilling over a red dress. They were both laughing, their bodies tucked close in a way that told a very simple story. "The passenger," Harris said quietly, "was a woman from your husband's office. Her name is Rachel Carter. She works at Pierce and Lowell." My stomach turned so hard I thought I might be sick. I couldn't take my eyes off the photograph. Those were Marcus's hands on her waist. Marcus's smile turned toward her. He looked happy, relaxed, like a man on vacation with a woman he wanted. Not a man with a wife in another state, planning to surprise him with a pregnancy he didn't even know about. "We have proof of the affair," Harris went on. "Hotel receipts, security footage, card charges. That's one piece of this." "One piece," I repeated, barely above a whisper. "What's the other?" He hesitated, and in that pause I felt the floor under my life crack a little more. "The other thing is, we're starting to believe the crash may not have been random." My fingers curled tightly around the edges of the bedsheet. "What do you mean, not random?" "2 nights before the accident," he said, "your husband made a call to a man in Dayton, Ohio. This man has a record. We'll keep his name out of this for now, but he's known for doing favors that dance on the wrong side of the law." At the time, we were already running a tap on his phone for a different case. He opened his folder again and pulled out a transcript. His fingertip followed the printed lines. "Your husband bragged that he was going to teach a lesson to the cheating spouse of one of his clients. He described the woman's car make, model, color. He told his friend to scare her a little, make her pull over, nothing too crazy. And," I asked, though my mouth was dry as dust, And your car, Miss Pierce, he said carefully, matches that description almost exactly. Same color, same model year, same general build. Olivia says she was told by that same man to follow a car that looked like yours. She was already drunk when she got behind the wheel. She says the plan was to cut the woman off, make her stop, maybe yell, but she lost control, and the person she hit was you. I stared at him, my mind struggling to hold all the pieces. You're telling me, I managed, that my husband wanted someone else scared and I got hit instead? He met my eyes. We think the driver who hit you was following the wrong vehicle, he said. You were not just unlucky, Miss Pierce. You were in the middle of something planned, even if you weren't the intended target. We're still sorting out the charges and who knew what, but we are sure of this much. Your husband's hands are not clean in this. I sank back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. For a moment, the white tiles above me blurred and doubled. My whole life felt like a scene from a cheap thriller, the kind I would have flipped past on late-night TV. My husband had been cheating on me. My husband had tried to steal my savings while I lay helpless. My husband had joked about hurting someone else, and I was the one who paid the price. If I had left for Columbus an hour earlier or an hour later, maybe the car they followed would have really been the one they were after. If I had ignored the idea of surprising Marcus and just called him instead, maybe I would have been home in Detroit, sitting on the couch with my hand on my belly, not here with my jaw wired shut and my future scrambled. The what-ifs stacked themselves in my mind like a wall, but none of them changed the simple truth. This was the reality I had. In the weeks that followed, everything became paperwork and numbers. There were meetings with lawyers, conversations with hospital administrators, careful explanations from my insurance company. In the middle of it all, Edward Lang followed through on what he had promised. Through his lawyers, he offered a settlement, $250,000, wired in dollars into a protected account the detectives helped me set up. My health insurance paid most of the current bills. His money covered the rest, plus the series of surgeries I would need over the next year to rebuild my face. I signed the papers with a trembling hand, knowing that no amount of zeros on a screen could balance what I had lost, but also knowing that money could buy me choices, a safer place to live, a better doctor, time to heal without worrying about clocking in. One of the detectives sat with me as I examined the account details, making sure Marcus's name was nowhere near it, that he would never have access, no matter what lies he told or tears he shed. Word of what happened made its way across the ocean to my mother's older sister, Denise, who lived in Manchester in the United Kingdom. She called me one afternoon, her voice crackly but strong through the hospital's speakerphone. I heard what that man did, she said, meaning Marcus. I heard what that car did. Baby, I am so sorry. A week later, I got notice that she had wired me £12,000 from an old inheritance. Use this to start fresh, she wrote in a little note tucked into a card. Don't look back unless you're checking how far you've come. When I was finally stable enough to leave the hospital, the social worker asked me if I had somewhere safe to go. The first image that came to mind was our little blue house in Detroit, peeling paint, creaking porch, the spare room that was supposed to be a nursery. The woman who had dreamed in that room didn't exist anymore, not in the same way. Going back there felt like stepping into a grave, so I didn't. Instead, I looked at a map and picked a different place, a city where I knew no one and no one knew me, Richmond, Virginia. New city, new state, same country, but for me it might as well have been another universe. With the help of a relocation counselor and my new bank balance, I rented a small brick townhouse on a quiet street, with white shutters and a tiny yard big enough for 2 chairs and a potted plant. I paid the deposit and several months' rent in advance, in dollars that felt both heavy and strange, like they belonged to some other life. I booked consultations with a plastic surgeon in Richmond, a calm man with kind eyes who explained the process like he was talking about fixing a cracked vase. He walked me through what could be rebuilt and what couldn't. You'll never look exactly the way you did before, he said gently, but you can look like someone new, someone whole. That sounded perfect to me. As the months passed and I moved through surgery after surgery, my face slowly reshaped itself. The mirror showed me a softer jawline, a straighter nose, a faint pink scar near my left eye that refused to disappear. The woman looking back at me looked familiar and strange at the same time, like a cousin I had only heard about in family stories. I started to recognize her expressions, the way her mouth tightened when she was angry, the way her eyes softened when she was tired but proud. I went to therapy twice a week, sitting in a small office that smelled like peppermint tea while a woman named Carla asked gentle questions and waited for my answers. I talked about the baby, about the accident, about Marcus lifting my hand like it was just another tool for him to use. I talked about the letter, the passenger, the wrong car. Some days I left her office feeling lighter. Some days I left feeling like someone had opened a box I'd nailed shut. But each session was a step away from the girl who had driven to Columbus humming along to the radio, and a step toward the woman who was learning to stand on her own. I found a job at a small accounting firm in Richmond, the kind of place where the boss still brought donuts on Fridays and everyone knew everyone's favorite coffee order. Nobody there knew my history. They only saw that I was quiet at first, then unexpectedly funny when I got comfortable, and very good with numbers. They saw my scars but didn't ask for the story unless I offered it, and most days I didn't. Marcus called a few times from jail, but I blocked his number. His lawyer sent letters about divorce, about splitting assets, about the house back in Detroit. I signed what my own lawyer told me to sign. I let the house go. I let his last name start to loosen its hold on me, even if it still clung to my official documents for a while longer. But there was one thing I couldn't let go of. No matter how many new streets I learned in Richmond or how many steps I took along the James River at sunset, I needed to see him one last time, not as his wife, not as his victim, but as the woman who had walked through fire and come out with a new face and a stronger spine. I needed him to look at me and understand that everything he had tried to destroy had become the foundation of a life he would never touch again. 2 years after the accident, I walked up the wide stone steps of the courthouse in Cleveland, Ohio, and felt like every step was a test. The air was sharp and cold, the kind that stung my lungs when I breathed in too fast. My navy suit hugged my new body in a way my old clothes never had, tailored to fit the woman I had become instead of the girl I used to be. It had cost more than my first car, and that was exactly why I chose it. I wanted to feel solid, expensive, untouchable. My curls were shorter now, shaped close to my head in a style that showed the faint scar near my left eye. I didn't hide it anymore. I let it sit there like a small, pale witness. In my hands, I carried a thick folder with everything neatly arranged inside, bank records showing every attempt Marcus had made to steal from me, transcripts of phone calls about the scare job that had gone so wrong, printouts of hotel footage with timestamps, legal papers with heavy letters and long numbers. Each page was a piece of the story he had tried to bury. Holding that folder felt like holding a shield. My palms were damp, but my fingers didn't shake. I had practiced this walk in my head 100 times, from the front steps to the wooden benches to the hard plastic chair behind the prosecutor's table. I slipped into the courtroom quietly and sat in the second row behind the prosecutor, close enough to hear every word, far enough that I looked like any other interested stranger. Marcus was already there at the defense table. For a moment, I just watched him. He was thinner than I remembered, his once smooth face now lined at the mouth, gray at the temples like someone had rubbed ash into his hair. He wore a suit that was a little too big, like it had belonged to another man and he was only borrowing it. He glanced over his shoulder, eyes sliding past me and then moving on. To him, I was just another woman in a courtroom, maybe a paralegal, maybe a reporter, maybe nobody at all. That was exactly the point. The judge entered, and everyone stood. When we sat again, the room settled into a quiet, slow rhythm. Papers shuffled, a clerk called the case number, and the judge read out Marcus's full name in a firm, even tone. Hearing it spoken like that, without affection or anger, just as a fact in a list of charges, cut through something in me. For years, that name had meant husband, partner, maybe future father. Now it meant defendant. The prosecutor laid out the charges in simple lines that landed like heavy footsteps. Attempted theft from a spouse, conspiracy to commit harm, fraud tied to fake business expenses and false invoices at his old firm, Pierce and Lowell Freight Solutions. They talked about how the company had fallen apart after the investigation started, how it had been rebranded as Lowell Freight Services under his former partner, limping along without him. They talked about the scare job he had ordered on a client's cheating spouse, how the wrong car got followed, how my body ended up paying for his entertainment. Marcus sat there, jaw clenched, eyes darting between his attorney and the judge. Once, when the mention of my frozen bank accounts came up, he looked over his shoulder again, almost like he could feel someone's eyes on him. His gaze brushed over me for a second, then moved on, not stopping long enough to see anything. I wondered if some small part of him felt it, the presence of the woman whose life he had tried to rewrite. The lawyers went back and forth for a while, the way lawyers do, trading facts and arguments in calm voices that didn't match the weight of what they were talking about. I listened, my hands folded over the folder in my lap, feeling every word land on top of years of hurt. At some point, I realized my foot was tapping quietly, counting out the beats until it would be my turn. Finally, the judge looked up from his notes and asked if there were any victim statements. The prosecutor turned in his chair and met my eyes. We had practiced this moment in a small conference room downstairs, going over what I wanted to say until the words felt like they belonged to me. He gave me a small nod. It was my cue. I stood up, the folder held close against my chest, and walked down the aisle. The room felt longer than it was, the distance stretched by every heartbeat. When I reached the front, the clerk directed me to a spot where I could face the judge. My legs were steady, my palms were still damp, but I could live with that. Your Honor, I began, my voice echoing more than I expected in the quiet room. My name is Alana. I was Marcus's wife during the time of these crimes. The sound of my name snapped his head up like a rubber band. I watched his eyes jump to my face. His mouth opened just a little, like he was about to say something and forgot how. I saw confusion there first, then a flicker of recognition, a tiny spark trying to push through the changes in my features. Maybe it was the way I held my chin. Maybe it was the shape of my eyes. But to him I looked like a memory kept underwater, blurred, warped, almost but not quite familiar. I am the woman he tried to steal from while I was lying in a hospital bed, I said, making sure each word was clear. I am the woman whose car was hit when his plans went wrong. I am the woman who lost her child because he thought hurting someone would be entertaining business. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the judge, who must have heard hundreds of stories like mine, watched me with a still, focused gaze. I told the court about the night I woke up in the dark hospital room, eyes closed, mind awake, listening to Marcus whisper about my bank app and my fingerprint. I described the feel of my own hand being lifted like it was a tool, not a part of me, pressed against the cold glass of my phone. I told them how he read off the amounts he was transferring, how he split up the money so it would look less suspicious, how his cousin Tasha giggled softly in the shadows while they carved up the savings I had built dollar by dollar. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. Then I talked about the accident, not the blood and metal, but what came after. I explained how I learned that a drunk driver had hit my car, and that she hadn't been alone. I described the hotel hallway photo, the red dress, the arm around the waist that used to hold me. I told them about the phone call he had made to a man in Dayton, Ohio, about how he had ordered a lesson, a scare, something just shy of violence, something he thought he could walk away from. I said the words wrong car and felt them hang in the air like smoke. I have rebuilt my life, I said at the end. I live in another city now. I go to work. I pay my own bills. I sleep at night without checking my doors 3 times. I sit by a river when my chest feels tight, and I remind myself that I am still here. I don't want his money. I don't want his apologies. I only want the court to see who he really is, because I spent years loving a man who was only pretending to love me back. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Marcus's chair scraped softly against the floor as he leaned forward. Alana, please, he started, his voice cracking. The judge cut him off with a sharp look and a firm voice. You will speak through your attorney, Mr. Pierce. I turned my head and looked straight at Marcus. For the first time since the accident, I let him see everything I had been carrying. The anger that had once burned so hot it scared me, the grief that had felt endless, the strength that had grown quietly underneath all of it like roots. His face crumpled. Whatever script